We are excited today to have Jeff Dunbar join us. And Jeff is a wealth of knowledge and fun and a 2002 grad. He's a financial advisor with Merrill Lynch in the Baton Rouge office. His clients include corporations, high net worth individuals, and retirees. And he's driven by the relationships that he shares with clients. And he takes deep pride in all of their success. So originally from Slidell, Jeff is a former educator and coach who had a bit of a career switch. And he enjoys spending time with his 6 children and his wife, Bridget, who is also an alum. And they are members of, right there, the Sacred Heart Catholic Church, and they volunteer with a variety of organizations down there. So we are excited to have Jeff join us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Annie to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. And thank you, Jeff, for joining us. This topic I'm really excited about because I am one of those financially illiterate individuals, Franciscan grads that, could really benefit from your wealth of knowledge and what you're going to share today. But before we kind of dive into the nature of what you do and what you can teach us, wanted to learn a little bit more about your time at Franciscan. I know we each have unique experiences. So first off, the first question that I think every grad gets is, what household were you in?
Oh, this is a tough one for me because I was actually in 2 households. I was in His Image, IHI, and I was also in PWC, an unofficial household, planting with Carl, and that was a pretty formative part of my experience there at Franciscan. But there's no Mansfields in the attendees, but I do take some credit for helping save IHI when I was an RA. I don't know what the RD was thinking when he hired me, because they told me that I had more infractions than anyone else in the dorm. And I explained that I had inside knowledge to help them, clean things up at Marion Hall at the time. But I went into a room and there was some contraband in the room. And in exchange for ignoring it, those 3 gentlemen on the POP wing joined IHI that Saturday. So we went from 3 members to 6 that weekend. It was a pretty important day in the history of IHI.
That is a wonderful story. I'm sure there's also a story behind that, like, unofficial household that you were in. I've heard about a few of those over the years. That's great. What is kind of another memory you might have? I know the friars, different friars come and go, but was there anyone at Francisco when you were there that you interacted with?
Yeah, I really think that when I think of Franciscan, I think of, like, in Revelations when it says we're surrounded by, such a cloud of witnesses. I just think there's so much good, and I'm so grateful for what Christy and Tim Delaney have done with the alumni, and I think the friars were just key to making the place what it was. Just their care, the pastoral care, and for me, it was I was Father Sam's doubles partner. And so playing against Father Michael Scanlon, Father Gus, and others, and then Father Larry Ullman really took a lot of time with me, and I was able to visit Loretto and see the novitiate and other places there with the friars. Of course, everybody picks Father Dave, but we don't need to pick him up too much. He's doing really well.
It's quite a flex to say you play doubles with Father Mike Scanlon. So.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a pretty good answer. And I'm actually from the Loretto area, so I'm glad that you were able to see our beautiful mountains.
Yeah, Western PA, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yep, I love it. Well, awesome. Well, I think that that can kind of lead us into sort of your career now, because one thing I love about interviewing people such as yourself is that when most people think of Franciscan grads, they think of someone who's like directly involved in ministry, whether that means youth minister, teacher, and I mean, I brag about how wonderful our teachers are and our youth ministers, but I think it's really neat seeing someone in the finance industry, and I love just highlighting that. And so, yeah, if you could just tell us a little bit about first kind of what attracted you to that industry and to your role, and then also I'm sure it's connected to kind of that broad idea of why it's important, and why it's important for a Franciscan grad to be thinking about thinking ahead and thinking about their finances.
Yeah, right. When I left Franciscan, I was a teacher and a coach at Jesuit High and at a school run by the Brothers of the Sacred Heart. And you had to wait for the bell to ring to be able to go to the bathroom. And so I knew I wasn't going to stay in that field. I loved coaching, and I was probably a terrible teacher to some degree. I was still pretty young, but as I started to sort of think about what options were out there, I had a mentor who was in the financial services, who was a faithful guy. And I just saw that you could be a good father, a good provider. And when you combine sort of, if you like being with people and you like the strategy that's involved with financial planning and walking with people, could be a great career. And so we basically serve people in 4 ways. So financial planning is really about cash flowing your future, your future lifestyle and your future needs. So we're financial planners. We also are, you could say we intelligently deploy capital. So that's like this idea of asset allocation. So there's some strategy behind that. And then we're working as personal bankers now. A lot of our services have been combined and condensed, you could say. So if somebody's trying to get a mortgage, or their business is trying to get a loan, or there's some other type of debt they're looking at or considering, we're assisting in that process. Even things like helping people manage their flight miles. We have a team of people that helps us support our clients and just to make their financial lives easier. And then the last way really is just as a trusted partner or trusted advisor. There's things that you speak to a priest, an attorney, an advisor that you wouldn't share necessarily with everyone. And so those are really the ways that we're serving people, in the work. And it is an important work. People will say that money is the number one reason for divorce. It's probably, rooted in other issues with communication and vulnerability and these other issues. But it's wonderful to meet with families and to be able to help them navigate their financial lives. And a lot of times that bleeds into other areas of life as well. But that's what our team provides for people.
Wow. Well, yeah, I know I'm one of those people in the boat of finances stress me out, makes me anxious. It's something I kick down the road. And I think also too, I'm in sales, so I know people spend emotionally, which sometimes, is not necessarily strategically the best thing for their future. So sort of what kind of advice would you give to somebody, particularly speaking to a Franciscan audience? They just graduated, maybe they graduated 5-10 years ago. Maybe they were in the same spot as you were in terms of how do I provide for my family? When I was first graduating from Franciscan, I didn't really, think about this, my 401k. So I know that's kind of 2 questions, because that's like, it's probably, you'd say something different to the recent grad than to the person who is a couple years out.
Yeah, I think just starting with what you said earlier about some of the emotions that come into play, what you find, I don't know if, if people haven't done counseling, real counseling, that's a great place to start, because so many of our preconceptions and so many of the emotions that play in our finances really come from our family of origin. And part of the work of being a financial advisor is helping people distill, what their values are, what their goals are, helping them prioritize that, and to separate that from the other things that are going on. To answer it just more specifically to the, if I was speaking to Jeff 20 years ago, it's hard to say that, but my gray chin betrays me. If I was speaking to Jeff 20 years ago, I would say get a budget. Let's just first start with the basics. And then, for somebody who's 5 or 10 years and they have a job that's, it may not be their dream job right now, but it's sustaining them and they're on a good trajectory. It's time to get really serious about sacrificing a little bit more for today, for tomorrow. And psychologists and philosophers have noticed for a long time that when we think about ourselves into the future, we think about ourselves in the third person. And so if you go to a 12-year-old boy who's lighting a cigarette and you say, hey, you're 12 years old, you should even have that, and don't you know you're going to have cancer, when you're 70 years old. When they think about themselves in the future, they'll say, that's too bad for him. That's too bad for that guy. And so at UCLA, they did a study with virtual reality with goggles, and you would walk into a room and look in a mirror, and you would see an age progressed version of yourself. And then they would do surveys of a control group and of a group that saw the age progression, and ask them questions about diet, exercise, saving for retirement. And people who are able to visualize themselves in the future answer those questions more, I guess, with increasing desire to help kind of serve themselves in the future. So one of the issues that you encounter when you're early in your career is that the focus so much is on the career, on getting in, on that success. It's all near term, and we have to be able to step outside of our business for a little bit, to focus on what the end goal is. So that would go back to my philosophy class with Dean Healy and others. That Aristotle says, what is last in execution is first in intention. So as Christians and as Franciscan grads, we're thinking about heaven first, and on a material level, we're thinking about where is this leading my family? Where am I going to be after this work is done?
That was such an integrated answer. Like 3 cheers for a liberal arts education, tying it all
right.
in.
That's right.
Wonderful. That kind of ties in my next question, which is, that seems like the proper approach to kind of how to view your spending, your financing, your future, your investments. And what would you say are some of the pitfalls that people fall into? And then from there, if you could then talk, and I know lots of people have opinions on this, kind of the moral realm of investments, because I know that's a hot topic these days. And
that's right. Did you see
hear all perspectives?
Did you see the Pints with Aquinas? Matt Fradd hosted, I think Trent Horn and another well-known Catholic intellectual type. They were debating whether it's moral to invest in 401ks. Yeah. And that's really a question about, in Catholic moral theology, about cooperation with evil, being proximate or remote. And I would, in the U.S., the United States Catholic Conference of Catholic Bishops provided their own investment guidelines several years ago, where they just laid out, here's what we're doing. And, my brother was in seminary for a long time. He was in youth ministry. We have a financial advising team. We work with a lot of Catholic families and institutions and business owners. And so this comes up, but I would just say that I'm thinking of, I'm forgetting who the church father is who says, we need to be in the world, but not of it. It might be Tertullian. I'm sure there's people in the chat that can fix that for me. But we would never, seek to profit, directly off of activities that are intrinsically immoral themselves. So that would be something that's outside the bounds, and not just for Christians, but just for, if you're even a secular person, you should have a sense of that ethic, even if you don't know where it comes from. But at the same time, a lot of businesses might have PR projects. They might have human resource policies and things that we would disagree with, but we can't really control that per se. We're really seeking to not have direct connection to activities that would be not for the common good. So that's kind of one way of answering that moral question. There's lots of resources that we have at our disposal. So when people have specific questions, we dive into that, and we'll do a deep dive on companies and what they're doing. Interestingly, the USCCB suggests that if you are going to invest in a company that might have, say a small percentage of their revenue might come from something you find detestable. Let's say it's, could be cigarettes for somebody. I have a client who doesn't like Coca-Cola because it's giving people diabetes, she says. But it's okay in those situations to be, if you're a shareholder in those companies, just to write a letter to the board explaining what you find not reprehensible, but what you object to in the company, and how it would be a better company and better serve the common good if they made such changes. So I don't want to belabor that point too much, but
no, I'm
that's a
glad.
good question.
I'm glad we touched on it because it's just a current thing. And while we're on the topic of investments, though, I was a philosophy major too. So in the spirit of defining our terms, could you define stocks, bonds, and then CD?
Yeah,
CD?
certificate of
I
deposit.
don't even know what that one is.
Yeah, though there's one of the issues with people taking ownership and getting a good plan together and getting ahead of this area of their life is that the nomenclature can be so foreign. And I have a brother-in-law who's a scientist. He's actually like a mathematician. He's called a computational scientist now. And he'll start talking, and I'll just nod. I'll just follow along that way. And for some people, that can be the same situation here. But so one of the important elements for anyone would be just becoming familiar with these terms. So a stock would be understood as a ownership in a company. A bond is essentially lending money to a company or to a government entity. It could be a municipal bond in exchange for an interest payment, on that money that's been lent. And then that third security that you mentioned is a certificate of deposit. This is a deposit that's with a banking institution, and three elements. There's different elements for each of those, but one would be on a level of risk. That stocks tend to have more risk, and so when a company fails, the shareholders are left typically without any of their capital, so they can lose everything. A bondholder would have a claim on the remaining assets in a bankruptcy proceeding, so they have some right to their original investment, at least the value of that original investment. And then with the CD, you have the full faith and credit of the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation, FDIC insurance, up to limits. And so if a bank fails, like Silicon Valley Bank did this year, then a CD holder in that bank would receive their a full refunding of their investment. So those are three differences. But for for young investors and for most people, if they're going to be investing for the long term, like their retirement would be, then having a good allocation to stocks that's diversified is going to be the best outcome or the most likely outcome to meeting their goals.
Thank you. That helped a lot. And speaking of goals, so long-term goals and kind of setting up these strategies and diversifying, your portfolio is something I always hear, and have something in stocks or real estate or whatever it is. Any advice for setting those long-term goals? Like, why should we do it? Like, why should we be thinking about it? And then what are the first steps to going about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first steps that we would encourage someone to get involved in, it's similar to working out. I asked a friend of mine, Devin Gradwell, played rugby with us when we were at Franciscan, and we asked Devin recently, what's the best workout? What's the best thing you can do to get jump started in a workout? And he goes, oh, get a workout buddy. Get somebody to work out with you. And we were expecting he was going to talk about certain exercises or the right, So sometimes just having somebody to assist you to be accountable can help a lot. And in that process, you really start with, what are my assets and liabilities? What's my income and what are my expenses? And then what are my goals? So that's how that process would initiate. And just to go back to the question, what would, if you could rephrase it for me, what would be the first steps you asked?
Yep. So yeah, and I think you kind of touched on it, is getting a buddy, or like somebody like yourself.
Finding some people that might be similarly situated or that can help you be accountable. You can certainly reach out to somebody like myself. I know Tom Berg is a financial advisor. He's an 03 or 04 grad of the university. I know there's probably many others, but I'd reach out to somebody you trust and just start that process of planning and seeing what goals are attainable and taking those steps.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I know we have a couple of minutes left. So if anybody in the Q&A wants to throw any questions in there for Jeff. But one thing we didn't really touch on yet is the 401k. I know we touched on it in the more controversial sense, but in the less controversial sense, and just your 401k, like what advice do you give your clients about that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, for most people, especially the people that might be on this on this webinar, if you're in your 40s or younger, it's important to push as much, defer as much as you can into the 401k. And so for a lot of people, they'll just put in what their employer matches. But I would, if you can afford it, I would get to 10, 15, or even 20% of my income into the 401k. For every dollar you put in today, that's like putting in $5 in 20 years. And if you look at your wage expectations in 20 years, it's for some people it's attainable, but it's unlikely that your wages grow by 5x in that period of time. And so those dollars are more valuable today to get in early and to invest aggressively when you're young, not to worry about dips in the market, that these are to be expected. So.
Well, that was good to hear. And then, this is a little selfish question, but going back to the budgeting part, because that's where I'm at in my journey. Any advice as to first steps when kind of, first approaching budgeting?
Yeah, there's a lot of good spreadsheets out there. I would start with a good spreadsheet. You can pull one offline, or if somebody contacts me, I can send one their way. And in that process, sort of like when you do your examination at the end of the day, or maybe at lunchtime, if you're hardcore,
you're examined.
just do that examination with the budget and say, like, hey, Lord, in what ways am I giving you glory in this? And in what ways is this about, my need for security or my need for distraction or these other things? You don't have to take a spiritual tent, every time you look at it. but I think it's important just to check, is Jeff just going to McDonald's every day? You know, that's probably not a good use of my money or my time or my body. So
Yeah, no, that's great. I love how you bring in the psychology of it because it's all integrated,
right.
the spiritual, the psychological, and then, our actions.
Yeah.
So no, that's really great. I had a priest recently tell me to pray with the third joyful mystery, the nativity, because the fruit of that is attachment to worldly things,
Right.
which has been really helpful in kind of seeing what are those things, what are those attachments that aren't helping me to live a fulfilled life and in my
Right.
goals.
That kind of that Ignatian detachment, and that's a great place to be.
Yep, I've been not to do a selfish plug, but I've been praying on the Hallow app. So okay, that's where this is coming from.
That's right. I'm just getting on to take your quizzes.
Okay, thanks. Well,
Yeah.
someday we'll get you onto the Ignatian prayers. But last question, just because you mentioned retirement. So like how much should people have saved up? Like what's a good rule of thumb?
So when you're building out retirement planning, you typically want to start with what's guaranteed. Some people still have pensions; those are becoming, more and more rare. And but for most everyone will have Social Security, and so you want to start by going to ssa.gov. Getting your profile set up so you can see what your Social Security benefit would be. I know there's questions about its sustainability, but for those, inside policy making and everything that we believe, that's gonna be there in some shape or form. It may not be as much as we expect it to be today, but it's going to be there. And then the question really is sort of how much money do I need to live on? If there's anything to learn from today, it's that you can draw 4 to 6% off of a pile of money that's invested in a diversified way, and you'll never run out of money. So that pile of money, so if you think I need $60,000 to live on, for most people, Social Security might cover around $24,000 a year, $2,000 a month at their full retirement age. Some more, some less. And so now you're trying to cover out the other 36,000. Well, at a 6% withdrawal rate, you'll need $600,000. And at a 4% withdrawal rate, you'll need $900,000. So people sometimes get worried or concerned that these are big numbers, but the beautiful thing about compounding is that most of that growth happens in the last years of the investments. Mm-hmm. So I know we're running out of time, but I wanted just to cover that with you. That 4 to 6% distribution rate could help you determine the amount that you might need to retire, because you can reverse engineer your annual income in retirement.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much. This was super helpful. I took lots of notes. Could you fill us in on what would be the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I could, you could just Google me. We're the Dunbar group. If I can share a quick picture. This is my family, and I can pull down to here. If you can see that, if you see that slide, that has my email address and phone number if anybody needs it. But yeah, just a Google will get you there as well.
Awesome.
And I would be I'd be reluctant to not mention that the most important thing I got at Franciscan wasn't my degree, but my wife Bridget, who was a nursing major there. We didn't date while we were there. That was probably for the best, she says. I may not have been ready, but this is our family. So 5 girls, and our eldest Therese will be a freshman next year at Franciscan.
Oh, congratulations! Oh,
yeah,
that's the dream. Wow, wonderful! Such a beautiful family.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so
thanks for letting me share that. It was great to be with you, Annie, and Christy. Thank you for all of your input.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It was really great to have you, and we appreciate it.
All right. And thanks to Kate Lesniewski for not letting Bob on.
All right. We hope to see you all next month. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks for coming.
bye.
All right, bye.